Balake. Where is Balake at?
My name's Blake.
Do you want to go to war, Balake? I'm for real. Ron.
Ron is here today, not with Balaki, but with Brian Nord. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me here, Aaron. It's a big moment.
It's a pleasure to have you on here. I've been wanting to talk with someone about Landmark for a while, and you are a perfect person to have this conversation with. Before we even get into introductions, particularly, and I think I want to do this before we do introductions.
Sure.
I have titled this video, "The Cult of Landmark." Now, Landmark is an organization that has a reputation for being very litigious, just like Scientology earned that reputation, in the 60s through the 90s. I know a lot of people are afraid of speaking out about Landmark or saying the wrong thing about Landmark or getting in the crosshairs of Landmark. And I realize calling it a cult is something that's quite controversial, particularly to former members. And it might even be something that would prevent current members from even being interested in anything you have to say in this interview. And yet I'm the one who's calling it a cult. I wanted to give you an opportunity, before we even get into introductions, which we will do, to just give me your thoughts on my statement, my title, that we are here to discuss the cult of Landmark.
Yeah, sure. It's great. So first of all, recently there was a book that came out from one of my peers, a former leader, and it's called "Is It a Cult?" And so I was a staff member and a program leader with Landmark for 26 years. And I left in November. So when you traffic and you go, when you're in our world, you hear that question all the time. Mm-hmm. And so you're very programmed to be, you're trained. Program might be like bad language, but you're very, very, very trained. What is a cult? What is not a cult? What's the definition of a cult? Blah, 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 blah. So when I kind of came to the realization that I needed to be out of this thing, I saw a documentary and they called it a high control group. And that spoke to me. Somehow I couldn't quite get my hands on being full blown culty. Like I think of Jonestown. And I know there's all this. Now I've been watching all these videos and I'm down 80 rabbit holes since I left on YouTube. But for the general, and my own personal opinion about it is similar. Rick Ross was recently on the podcast. Rick Ross is like a cult expert, and we were trained at Landmark that he is like this, like we were trained in that. So anyhow, I don't know if you've ever heard of him. But he was very clear on this podcast that Landmark per se, as a consumer, a customer, in watching these Scientologies, I think you guys call it like the public or something. Yeah. For those folks, he said he didn't think that it was a cult, but maybe as you move up into the, like the higher levels of the organization, it probably is. And that's my experience as well. That's where
Very interesting.
That's my view of the whole cult conversation.
Very interesting. And if it looks like I'm not paying attention to you, I'm trying to figure out how to get my notes, because I already have follow-up questions based on the limited things that you've said. And I'm trying to get my notes over to this side of my screen so it doesn't look like I'm staring off into space every time I refer to them. Okay, so while I'm trying to figure out how to get my notes over here, explain to us what your role was in Landmark.
Okay, good. So I started, this could take 10 hours, but I started out I did the forum, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I started out as a staff member in 1998, and I was the receptionist in the New York Center. And at that time, that was considered a part-time job. I only could work 50 hours. So that was a part-time job at Landmark, 50 hours.
Oh my God.
It's
I mean,
true.
it just sounds like Scientology so far completely now.
Correct. So this is why I think I fell in love with your channel, because you talk a lot about being on staff, and I was on staff, and I was telling one of my friends, so Landmark staff people work Monday through Saturday, usually 9:30 in the morning till anywhere from 9 to midnight in the evening. Saturdays, you get done early, 6 o'clock. And then one Saturday a month you have off. If you take it. And so, and sometimes you have to come in earlier at like 8 in the morning. Sometimes you have to stay till 1 in the morning, maybe doing your assignment you didn't have time to do, so you have to look up words. So when I sent you the email, I was laughing at watching your video of this expose. We found this lady's stuff in the trash. I was laughing because I thought, this poor lady who's working in this office just decided to clean her desk and throw it in the trash. And she's getting and now it's on YouTube for the whole world to see. But she'd lay out, she'd go, okay, I have 5 weeks from now, I have this event. These are the actions to take. 4 weeks from now, we do that religiously. You got to call it a battle plan. We call it 5-week planning. So I was just laughing. So anyhow, I started out as the receptionist. And then over the years, I held most roles within the center and worked those period of time. On top of that, I was also what is called a seminar leader, or I led a program called the Self-Expression Leadership Program. That was considered my assisting agreement, or some people call it volunteering. So that could be anywhere from additional 20 hours or so a week on top of my work schedule. So most Sundays I would be doing that on top of that, and definitely after work. So in my mind, I'd be done with work like at 10, and then I'd go do my seminar reading and make sure I was ready to go do my big, to do the big seminar session. I'd lead the seminars evening seminars. And then for the last 7 years, up until 2023, my last 6 months, I had a new role because they're redesigning things to make the company be 100% on the internet. But mostly what I did for the last 7 years is I was what's called a centers division director. And that is, I was accountable for the different centers and center managers. So I reported and worked directly with the executives, which includes Werner Erhardt's brother and sister, Harry Rosenberg, the CEO, and Joan Rosenberg I worked with a lot. She's the vice president. And that is what I did in that period of time.
Can I jump in with a question here?
Sure, go ahead.
Maybe a comment followed by a question. So I've mentioned Earnhardt Seminar Training, aka EST,
Erhardt,
and
yeah.
Landmark. I've mentioned these things on my channel a couple times because in Scientology, it's a well-known fact that EST is an offshoot of Scientology, and Landmark is an offshoot or a repackaging of EST, or at least, and to actual members, that might sound oversimplistic, but that's my understanding. L. Ron Hubbard certainly said that EST was an offshoot and a squirrel group of Scientology. And Landmark, I think everyone knows Landmark came from EST. I don't know if everyone knows that or agrees, but
no, it did. That's for sure. That's Landmark. Okay. Is in 1991, after Werner Erhardt was they did 60 Minutes did a really damaging piece on him. He sold the company to his staff for $1, and then he went away. So, but that's highly debated. And then and then it became Landmark, and it's had different names: Landmark Education, Landmark Worldwide. But that has been, and so that is what happened then. Yeah. And
so that's part of my fascination with EST and Landmark, and why I said I've been wanting to talk to someone from Landmark, is because to me, anything that came from Scientology is by extension a cult, but I realize that's going to be controversial to members. And to be, let me see. Oh, what was the actual question I was going to ask you here? Oh my God, what was the actual question? Oh my goodness, I lost it. damn it. I forget what I was going to. Oh, yeah. This is my question. I don't think we've actually described or defined what is Landmark. So how would you describe Landmark? How would a Landmark member describe Landmark?
Great. So Landmark, first of all, Landmark is a 3-day weekend. There's separate individual courses that people can take. So Landmark sells personal and professional training and development courses and seminars. The promise of the cornerstone weekend of the Landmark Forum is a transformation. So the average consumer will come to an evening event or hear from a friend, and they will come to an introduction to the forum, and then they will hear, do I want to do this weekend seminar? And then they, if you sign up, you take the weekend, then it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 9 in the morning till 10 in the evening. And then there's a Tuesday night where you can bring all your friends and family after you've had your transformation. And that is the core product of Landmark. It's really actually, and you guys never talk about this in Scientology, and I'm on your channels, and I'm kind of curious about it because when I did this program, I was 20. And my family, I have amazing parents, and but we were really, when I was 16, I came out as gay, and it really created a rift in my family. It wasn't bad, they weren't evil or anything, but I just was kind of like on life on my own. And I went to therapy, and I was wanting to be healthy. And so I ran into somebody, and they told me, oh, you'd like this weekend course. And I thought, well, doing a weekend thing sounds great. I was the easiest person ever to sign up for something. So I did the weekend, and during that weekend, it was radically amazing for me. I let go of so much low self-esteem, hating myself. I had been sexually assaulted when I was a kid. I had been beaten up by 30 kids. I let go of all my resentment. I literally walked out of there, and I chose being gay, and all the questioning and doubting of myself and hating of myself was gone in 3 days. That really happened for me, and it was radical. And then I was able to talk to my family, and especially my dad, and we had some of the most amazing conversations, and it changed our whole family forever that one weekend. It was amazing. So the forum, that's why I think this is it gets controversial, because the course for most people haven't experienced like I did. And it's like, and Landmark really enjoys, and I don't know if they do this in Scientology, but they really enjoy the like people go in and they're like, yeah, this is a cult, and then they walk out and they go, that was amazing, and it was not that big of a deal, and everybody's yay, and it's very exciting, and so most people who've done it, their experience was similar to mine. Probably they say it's like 98% people say that. It's probably more like 80% or 70%. Mm-hmm. But so there's people who, if you have a friend who's down, if you have, or somebody who's wants something new in their life, or, then the forum is a great thing to offer somebody. And it's really not the first couple courses are really, I was on fire. I moved my whole life around. It was amazing. So when people think of Landmark, who are in Landmark or have done Landmark, a lot of them have a lot of regard for what went down in their family, what went in their communication, and they still use what they got 20 years later.
Right.
So so the part that is challenging, which makes it, is when you get beyond just doing the basic consumer stuff, is where it really gets into a whole other world. And that is what I'm here to share about, especially. And this is where all of the upsets, what people have called abuse, the indoctrination, all of that happens as you find yourself getting deeper and deeper in. And I don't know if that's what Scientology is like as well. Where at first it's a very positive thing, because my overall view of Scientology, and I think a lot of landmark people tend to be very open people. They tend to be leaders in their organizations, and so they're strong people. And I think forever, a lot of times we just thought Scientology was like another thing you could do. We didn't. My generation did not have some big rift with Scientology. We were not, and I mean, we didn't really, until the South Park episode came out, I think nobody really thought of it as anything other than probably some other cool thing you could do to see what levels of living to be a person. That's kind of what the general feel was. And I think we kind of ignored when people called it, would blast on Scientology, at least my generation. The generation before me, I know where all this squirreling stuff comes from. For us, that was like in the past. That was the 70s, man. That was a long time ago. Everybody was wild back then. This is now professional. We're in the 90s, we're in the 2000s. And so anyways, the point is that Landmark, its relationship with Scientology, there is definitely a connection. And while somewhat debated, I believe that, and I've never really examined it deeply myself, but I've heard that you can take many of the things that are like in Dianetics, and they are in the forum. And when I listen to you guys talk, I hear things that sound eerily familiar. And according to this book I've been reading called Outrageous Betrayal, this gives the whole story of Werner
Let me see the whole
Erhard.
title.
It's
Can I see
called
the whole title?
Outrageous Betrayal. The dark journey of Werner Erhard from Est to exile.
Wow.
And in Anne's book, Is It a Cult? She said, read this. So I've been reading it. And they talk about, basically, there's a whole part of this about when Werner Erhard in 1968 started doing Scientology stuff. And he never got, for a 2-year period, he had a Scientology come and do auditing for his staff of the book selling business he was running at the time. And they sent him a letter like, you need to do something. You're going to be a level 2 or an OT2. I don't know what your guys' things are. And he sent them a letter back saying, I'm a 5. And that was it for him with Scientology. He'd soon start his own thing. So the S training was huge, kind of like how Dianetics stayed on the top of the bestseller list for decades. The S training was, according to what I read, I read that Dianetics was on the best-selling list for the bestsellers list for almost 15 years or something.
Well, it was on the bestseller list for a while. They got it back onto the bestsellers list 30 years after its release. So, but yeah, it was a craze. When Dianetics came out in 1950, there was a bit of a Dianetics craze throughout the U.S. It was on the bestseller list for a while.
Yeah, so I guess they would do auditing and not in Est, but he would do it. They continued the practice of doing auditing with the staff and with the program leaders during the 70s, and that is talked about in this book. And I've had a couple people I've checked in that were there from then, and they have said that was true. So Landmark, but the Landmark forum, what I did was not Est, and I don't know. I'm not an expert in the Est training. However, the Landmark forum is also very deeply rooted by a German philosopher named Heidegger. And Heidegger talked a lot about being, and maybe L. Ron Hubbard also is a fan of Heidegger. I don't know, but Heidegger was a Nazi. So what we're told, the number one source of influence of our way of living was a Nazi who was a hardcore Nazi. It's really exciting. It's really very, very good. I never knew any of this, because they don't tell you the whole deal. You don't know anything. You find out after it's your job, your world, your life, and you're 20 years into it. You're like, oh, isn't that interesting? Go ahead.
Okay, so if the main product that Landmark sells to the consumer level member is basically a 3-day weekend self-improvement seminar called the Landmark Forum.
Correct.
What do they have to keep selling members or to continue to get involved in it? Is it a one-shot deal? Do you do are the bottom level consumer members expected to do the forum over and over and over again?
No, it's a really good question. So when you do the forum, it comes with, so I used to teach evening seminars. So they have about all sorts of different topics at the seminar series. They go for 10 weeks, and they could be like relationships, money, love, sex and intimacy, beyond fitness. So they have a series of, so some people participate and go to once a week seminar, kind of like if you were going to your weekly AA meeting. I mean, they're big. They're usually about 100 people or 200 people in each one. They're done all around the world. So there's a way for the average consumer just to kind of practice and live by these things. And every seminar you take, like you go, okay, I want to have a breakthrough in money. And then you take the 10 sessions and then you worked on money, and then you go to the next one and then the next one. It's kind of like, so, and they're like $100, or now they're $200. So everything at Landmark's cheap too, for the most part, compared to everything else. Because what's happening in those seminars is every week, the leader, like myself, is inspiring the people to bring their friends and family each week. So then the guests, the people who are guests to find out about the forum, they go to an intro session. So I was reading, my partner Tim was reading on the chat, or before the session started, people were already talking. I went to that intro session. It was weird. Yeah. So in the seminar, you're always being, the minute you have a breakthrough, it's who are you going to go share that with? Who are you going to bring that to? If your integrity is in, give your word to the number of guests you'll bring next week. This is the game of Landmark, is sharing and bringing people in. Now, most people don't really, but there are people who do, and that is the whole model. So then you go from the forum, you could do these seminars, but then they have a course called the advanced course, and the advanced course is really, it's very powerful. Maybe that's where Scientology is, because I loved it. And it rocked my world, because it really has you go, okay, now that my past, I'm no longer being upset. I've let go of this baggage. I'm confident. Now, what the hell am I going to do with my life? In the advanced course, you start to think bigger about what you could do with your life. And then after that, you take that idea and you do a 4-month program. Now it's about 6, and they've changed the names of some of these things since the pandemic. But you do a leadership program. And in the leadership program, although they sell you on doing either a passion project or a community project, all the leaders of these courses are being trained in how many people did these people register into the forum. And you start beginning to learn how to live your life as a Landmark leader. And that moment is when you start getting, it starts shifting from you being a consumer, like just a normal person, to you being one of the people who are in for the mission. And that is, and you get trained in being in for the mission. It's good training, but you become now, and they have deeper conversations with you about the transformation of each and every human being on this planet, and what that would mean if we could have a whole world that would work for everyone with no one and nothing left out. So you get, and then they have you take stands and declarations like you're getting married about how you are going to be somebody who lives your life from your word, that your sacred word and your sacred oath, that you will change this world.
Got to be honest, sounds a lot like a cult.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I have a few follow-ups.
Go ahead. So this is, just giving you the way it works. Yes.
Okay. Oh my God. I don't even know where to go. I don't even know where to begin. Okay. Are there incentives to recruiting people?
No.
Interesting. No commission structure or anything?
No. Nobody gets a commission at Landmark.
Ooh.
No, what you get is you get nobility, you get status.
Say
So
what?
you get status.
Nobility? Like, is that a real word they use?
No, I mean, well,
Oh,
I've heard it used, but you get
okay.
a sense of, so if you want to be a leader who leads those introductions that I was talking about,
Yeah.
you have to register like 15 people in the forum. You have to bring like 15 guests. Once you meet those statistical measures of bringing people in, you get to be this introduction leader. Now that's a huge deal. Oh my God, I'm an introduction leader. Then if you lead introductions to 100 people and 25% or more of them register, now you can be a seminar leader. And then if you lead seminars and all your participants bring guests, then you could become a forum leader. So the whole structure that people are really motivated by in bringing people in, what you do, what is going on behind the scenes is they're achieving status.
It sounds like an MLM, but without the money.
Correct. It's very that the history goes that Werner Erhard was with, according to this book, Werner Erhard was in the 60s. You know, he was there was all this 60s echelon, all these different things going on. He did Scientology stuff. Then he found himself with this group called Mind Dynamics, and they did a lot of persuasive, like mind control kind of stuff. They did, I don't know about, I can't really speak about it fluently, but that group was an MLM. They came from an MLM, and he started to see how MLMs work. But he kind of is, he's a smart guy. Rick Ross says Werner Erhard is very smart. So he knew that if he was putting commissions on things, it would take away from that sense that you're doing something good for people when you are signing people up.
Okay.
So you never leave feeling like you were somebody who did something for money. So then when you're on a staff member, then you get paid. So by the way, all these leaders I'm talking about, they could have a full-time job. They could end up doing their leading and registering people, signing people up 30, 40, 20, 40 hours on top of their life and their families. So there's a lot of children of those people who grew up in like a landmark, growing up in landmark, that like they have huge upsets that they never saw their parents their whole childhood. Because their parents were on conference calls, calling people, going to these weekends, doing all this stuff for free. Every leader at Landmark, except for the people who lead the forum weekend, do all of those things for free. And then the staff all get paid a very low salary. It sounds like you guys got worse. But not like it was, I left after 26 years and I ain't got anything. So, you do all of that, and that's where you end up. I said that it's kind of shitty, but it's true. It's just true. And everybody knows it, and everybody kind of lives with it. The general consensus is taking the courses is really good, and the organization is messed up. That's how people who ongoingly kind of forward the action with Landmark, that's kind of the consensus. And for the staff, they don't think it's messed up. The staff think that they're on a noble mission and they get to be accountable, and then it gets worse from there, like with how they're treated.
It sounds like a similar version to the idea of clearing the planet.
Oh, correct. Exactly. It absolutely is. It's just not weird like Scientology. It's not weird like that. I'm kidding. I'm joking.
So I can see, though, how someone who just did it as a consumer, just doing the classes and the seminars, would be like, what do you mean it's a cult? It's just self-improvement. You can stop whenever you want. I can see how the complexion of the thing changes as your involvement in the organization changes. Now, I received an email from a viewer who was involved in Landmark, and I just want to read. This was just earlier today. It says, I took several Landmark classes many, many years ago. I understand the teachings of Landmark were derived from Scientology, the est tech. I've heard you and other former Scientologists mention that. It says, Landmark education is not a cult. I was free to leave whenever I wanted to. I was never harassed to be in more classes. I never received mail from Landmark. I was not brainwashed. I was not recruited to be on staff at Landmark. I took the classes I wanted to take, and when I felt I'd learned enough, I didn't take any more classes. And I can see how, if that's your experience, you would not feel that Landmark is a cult. Does that seem fair?
Mm-hmm. And that is why doing this interview is so hard. And that's why it's hard when you get in. I mean, again, I look at it like a very unhealthy, high control situation, because you can leave, and that's never been a thing. See, these are the things that have Landmark not meet the criteria of the definition of a cult. But that loyalty that gets established to the having the power and magic of transformation be alive and real for all people and who you are as you become a leader and a staff member, that deep commitment you've made, that seems so real and exciting for you, gets exploited, and it can become abusive. And there is, as you move along, it becomes even, you can even, lose your identity. And there's a lot of people who've led seminars, and they did this 30, 40 hours a week in, like it consumes your life. And then, if you don't hit that number, if you needed to have 100 guests in your seminar and you had 97, then they just cut you, and you just spent 7 years of your life over 3 digits. And that happens all the time. And they just say, sorry, and so people leave this situation having given themselves and their time and their years in a situation, and they're treated just like, it's a very high pressure environment. I don't know. When there was a lady, one of the things that inspired me to leave was there's another Scientology channel on YouTube. And there's many, as you know. But this guy, he did this video with her 4 years ago. It's like, I think it's called Sensibly Speaking, and is the name of the YouTube channel. And she did this several-hour video with him. And in that video, I got so impacted by the pressure for people to register people. It is so intense. Nothing else is more important than keeping those numbers. And the more you get in, the more you end up losing yourself to do anything for it. And then when you don't do it, the way you are interacted with and treated is definitely emotionally abusive. There's other issues with Landmark. I had a really positive experience. So did that lady. But Landmark, when you're in that, what they call a large group awareness training, when you're in that kind of, a lot of people who have trauma in their life, it gets triggered in their experience of Landmark. But Landmark is not, they're not health professionals. And they're very much, they're not responsible, many people claim, for how people, so there's a lot of people who get really messed up by the weekend. And they've dealt with a lot of lawsuits. And if you go to Rick Ross's Cult Institute, they have files and files of lawsuits and all the different claims that people have made over the years, suing Landmark from all sorts of things, from people committing suicide after the forum and their families coming to Landmark. So there's also another side to the whole thing, that all these people are coaching people in their lives, and it's very deep, but nobody's trained in professionalism. They're not health professionals. In fact, they're trained more in being business performers.
Interesting.
So in her story, and it's still on YouTube, her boyfriend killed himself. And the next day, they lived together. And the next day, somebody called her and registered her to do a course that weekend.
Yes, I mean the intense and uncompromising focus on numbers and stats to me is very reminiscent of Scientology. Now, you said you were in for 26 years. You said you had some incredibly positive experiences in Landmark. What made you leave? What makes you want to speak out about the Landmark experience and what people should be wary of?
Well, that's a good question, because it's really hard. The feeling is like, how did I end up here? how did I end up being one of these people who's saying this kind of thing? Does that make sense?
Of course it does.
When you're so in there, how did I end up here? This has been my entire life. So really, I started questioning what was going on in the last couple of years. And one day, everybody gets on a phone call. And Landmark had shifted to being in, we all moved to work because of the pandemic, we all moved to work at home. And we never went back to doing anything live. It was a crazy time because for a company that's conducting all these in-person courses all around the world, to shift yourself is a big deal. And it was really nuts. And there's no, I mean, they were still having us register people, fully knowing that the courses weren't going to happen at first because they didn't have anything set up online, but we were still all over it. Then we had to call and move them and ask them, and then they were mad at us because people didn't. It's a whole nightmare. So there's that, and the pressure's on you, and it's your fault that the person couldn't do the new weekend, and blah 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 blah, insanity. But what really, so that was enough for a person to want to walk away just at any job. But about a year or so ago, we got on a call, and we were told that the volunteering program that everybody's in is being canceled in North America. They said that they're doing it because Landmark has really been behind the times, and we need to get ahead of the times, and we need to professionalize ourselves. So this is no longer, they just did this whole spin on it. We're going to launch a leadership academy, and we're going to give people certificates, and you're going to be able to get certifications, and people will no longer have to meet Landmark numbers to lead things here. Because they get so much hell for that. And so I got on board, and we had to tell all these people that some of these people have been doing these volunteer agreements at like their whole, like this is like their second full-time job. And we had to call them and tell them, sorry, in 2 weeks, on September 30th, 2022, you will no longer be doing this. And that's the cutoff date, and nobody gets to go beyond that. So people were really upset. They were angry. It was a whole thing. All of a sudden, though, the executives and the management around me are all bringing up words like legal. Like, well, we can't do that. So something went down, was my suspicion, that they were in trouble, that they were doing something against the law, or that they had had a lawsuit or something. They would not say what it was, but as time went by, it kept being more and more real for me that these people, everybody's in a panic. But meanwhile, we're pitching to the world like, oh, we're reinventing ourselves and going into a new era. And so now people, as the year progressed, they were paying to do the exact same volunteer agreements that they never got paid for. And I thought that was messed up. So I started really going, what the hell's going on here? But I felt this sense of being lied to.
When you said they started paying, volunteers started paying, you mean now instead of being poorly paid, they were actually paying the organization?
Yeah, they were never paid. The volunteers were, the assisting program were not. Most of the people who lead the programs are never paid.
Okay.
They do in many cases is a full-time job as a person who assists. So they say we're not going to do that anymore. And then they started enrolling people into a academy. And this academy, people paid for. They didn't pay a lot, but they had to pay for it. And in that academy, as the year progressed, it wasn't some new kind of academy where people can get all this great training. I literally went to a weekend for the seminar leaders, and they said nothing has changed. We're the exact same thing. We just restructured. But they're making now people pay to do their assisting. So what I was left with is this is messed up, and they're in trouble, and they're selling everybody, and I'm being lied to. And the day before I left, one of the people who is a forum leader told me that yes, there was some legal thing that happened with some other organization. I don't know if this is true, But it was enough for me to have the person just flat out say, yeah, there was something. And I was like, you know what? I am not doing this. I'm not wasting my life lying to people, working all these hours. And I started watching these different definitions of high control groups and cults, and they have like 25 different things, you're in one of these groups. And the one that got me the most was they keep you busy. I just felt like my life was just being I was going to spend my whole life there. From 20 years old, I'm just turned 47. I'm going to spend my entire life doing this with these people, and they've been lying. So then I'm in the bubble because I work all that time. Then I start peeling it back, and there's all this stuff about Werner Erhard, and this book comes out, and and I start to like unpack the whole thing. And I thought I was crazy and maybe being over the top. And then I learned that there's just thousands of people who feel like I do. My closest friends, they all kind of silently just go away.
Mm.
And many of them, I shouldn't say all of them, many of them. So it's a whole thing. And I'm telling you, I mean, I didn't go into my story of how went through this, but I'll just give you an example of what I mean by it really smells like, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's a duck.
Mm-hmm.
So when I became I had to deal with myself that I would let myself do this. So the only way they would let me become the next level of being a seminar leader, they called it designated seminar leader, is I had to acknowledge to them. It took like 5 hours of phone calls, or many, many phone calls of these people. They get you on a call with like 6 other people. And the point is to get that you're not your personality. And my personality is being a fun-loving gay guy. So I had to say to them, it makes me so upset, that I'm not gay. I'm actually a landmark leader. That was the only way I could get my designation, was to see for myself that I'm not this thing. I'm actually and so your whole thought process, your whole mindset, everything becomes a separation. You just start seeing the world like you're one of the people changing the world, and everybody around you is something else. And my story over the years, imagine working 100 hours a week. How easy is it to get into a relationship? All the things that I wanted from this supposedly transformational organization, none of them came true. And I did have positive experiences, but there were so many nasty ones. Your committed listener, they could be like, oh my God, good for you. You did 10 people signed up. Good job. You did that. And literally an hour later, it could be 10 o'clock at night. You didn't do this report. So then you're up till 1 and they just rip you to shreds. You have no integrity. You have to keep integrity lists.
Integrity lists?
Integrity lists are like, so whenever you guys talk about ethics, I hear integrity lists. So integrity is the name of the game. And I think Werner Erhard I think that this narcissistic thing people accuse him of is pretty good observation. But he did a whole paper on how a person's integrity is not ethics. It's not morality. It's nothing other than your word, which is really convenient for him to exploit all these people. And nobody's seen the documents of like how the company is actually formulated. But when I used to have to do budgets, they always had, for every forum and advanced course, they would have a thing we had to budget for called a royalty. And it finally made sense because I was watching Shark Tank one day after all this, and I figured out, so he sold the company for $1. Who else would get a royalty?
Oh, it's going right to him.
Well, I mean, this is my guess. I don't know. I don't know if it all went exactly right to him or who it went to, but it makes sense to me. And it just pissed me off. I'm like, wow, I just was doing all this work, being what they call held to account. And this man got away with it. He's like 90 years old, and he never left, really. I mean, he wasn't in the whole picture, but he was always influencing everything. All the new things I went to that I thought, they called it the research and design team, I would later see in his work. And in the last 8 years, in 2015, New York Times did this really great article about him. And during that period, that's what Anne's book is about. Her book is about him and what she witnessed as physical violence that he was doing with his own staff, who are people that they asked us to go find for him. So this is a fucked up situation, pardon my language. And it is, and so when they said that, I just sent an email saying, because, I just had a moment with myself where I said, I'm just going to quit. So I quit. And that's very unheard of in our ranks usually, because they like to make sure you give a 7-month to a year notice when you want to leave your job. And if you don't, it's dishonorable. And one woman gave a 3-month notice this year. And one of the executives said to me, she's going to get cancer because she's not leaving honorably. I mean, this is the kind of conversations people have with you. You live in this fear that if you fuck up, you are going to be, you could literally, your whole being, you could ruin your life. So I could go on and on and on about how often you're threatened, you'll lose your job, how often the whole dynamic of that, and the way they publicly, when you get into those leader groups, that can put you right in front of like 100 people, and they just kind of take you apart. And it's just the whole thing is exactly what people accuse it of. And I think they're either a cult, or they need to, if they're not, they need to get what they call get off it and actually act like a normal business.
Right. The fact that they've convinced all these members to do all this stuff for free, to me, makes it sound even more like a cult. It would sound more legitimate if there was some sort of a financial incentive structure, even if it was a little more MLM. I believe MLMs are very cult-like. I also believe it's a dishonest business model. But the fact that they've convinced everyone to devote so much of their life to this cause for free, that to me makes it sound even more like a cult. How do so many people like you dedicate such large chunks of their life to this organization for free? How does that even work?
Well, I'm the kind of person that, see, if I was going to lead that seminar and my motivation was money, then it really isn't for the people in my seminar. It's not really for them, it's about me. So how you end up doing that is that, and you do, it's a very, my experience was that I would get good things out of it in my own life, and I would learn a lot, and I can hold, landmark leaders can go into their work environment, and like they can do a talk, they can do a TED talk. We're very engaging people. If you can get yourself to that level, so there's something about that where it for people, they feel like it is worth it because of what they get trained in, how they conduct themselves, and it seems like a more authentic place to choose to do it from.
I can actually appreciate that. I've actually always felt that it's best to do something for free or for a lot of money, but to do something for a little bit of money can feel degrading and demoralizing. Like you're either being virtuous by doing something for free, or you're being well compensated by making good money. But doing work for crap money is pretty demoralizing and can give someone a low sense of their own worth. So I understand maybe why somebody would agree to do something they felt was really valuable for free. I'm just asking, how do they survive?
Well, the people who do it for free, they have jobs in the real world.
So it's very much like Scientology staff members, because somebody could ask me the same question: how do Scientology staff members survive? And it's usually, because you said working part-time at Landmark is 50 hours. That's the same thing in Scientology.
Well, now it's
So
30. Now it's 30.
now it's 30.
Now it's 30.
So in Scientology, people who are on staff full-time, or what they call full-time, they usually either live in squalor and have some part-time job, or maybe their spouse works full-time, or maybe their family has money, but you simply can't survive or even pay bills working at a Scientology organization, even though it's a multi-billion-dollar organization. It sounds like Landmark is the same thing, but I guess I'm not sure. How does Landmark make money? Do they make money?
Mm-mm. Well, I don't, that we, part of the way, I believe they somehow, nobody can ever tell exactly where the money goes exactly. So
That's weird.
in this book, they talk a lot about licensing agreements. They talk about shell corporations. So nobody really knows exactly. But we get reports because the staff are part of an employee stock ownership plan. That's the corporate structure. It's called an ESOP. And so the ESOP is the technical owner of the company. So if Landmark performs well, and it's a structure, from what I understand, that's good for companies that are stable over time. It's not something you would enter into like in a new startup venture. So the ESOP is what owns the company. So we're required. They give us a statement. They give us a statement every year of the financial status. It's a law they have to do. So you can see different things like royalties, licensing on those things. Where those different expenses go is not necessarily clear to everybody. However, since the programs are less expensive and there's this whole, and the salaries are low, you live in a world when you're on staff that you never feel like the company is making money. In fact, you live in an environment where we never have any money. We can't really do anything. We can't buy a new chalkboard. We can't, so I believe there's got to be some money in all of that, because it doesn't make any sense that you would do it. And I have my suspicions, but I'm not, you can't tell. And when I spoke to, when I was talking to another critic of them, Rick Ross, he said, yeah, because you can't see how the company is structured. It's a private company. You can't see their documentations. You do not know. And I don't think people live in squalor, but I don't think they live, the salaries at Landmark are below average. So they're more like what a teacher, or maybe a little bit less than a teacher. So you could work 100 hours a week on maybe $50,000.
Okay.
Maybe 60.
Okay. I get what you're saying. Let me see. I had a question here. How many different Landmark? You said you worked out of the New York Center. How many?
Well,
centers
I worked in about 15 by the time I was done, and I live in Minneapolis now.
You worked at 15 different Landmark centers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 10, something like that. Yeah.
How many centers are there in the U.S. or in the world?
Well, they're currently, because they've shifted to going online, they've basically ended. They're in the middle of phasing out having centers, so to speak, in general. And there's about, but I think on average is about 40 to 45 worldwide.
That's it?
Yeah, and then each center might have satellite communities they do things in. Like I was the Houston center manager, but Austin, San Antonio, New Orleans, they all had like satellite places that were run 100% by people who were assisting.
Interesting. Did you see the documentaries about NXIVM?
Mm-hmm.
Did that make you go, uh-oh?
Well, NXIVM, Keith Raniere stole he was a big fan of this, so he definitely they called it ESP, executive something training programs is what what people signed up for in NXIVM. And so that whole brand of like coming in and doing a weekend course was According, again, I keep quoting Rick Ross, but he said that Keith Raniere ripped off Landmark-esque work, like he picked that whole model. He was a fan, he took charge of that. But when I saw Nexium, I didn't feel that way. I just didn't. I couldn't relate to. I could relate to their stories of getting swept up in something, and feeling you're too deep into it. But we didn't. I called a friend of mine, and I was like, well, we didn't brand anybody that I know of. And you guys talk about horrible trafficking of human beings, and I don't think we did that. And she goes, well, that's good. At least we've got that going for us, that we're not that bad.
Did you guys have words for non-members?
A graduate is someone who's done the forum, and everybody else is like a non-graduate. So there's the people who've done it and people who've not.
So you would refer to non-members as non-graduates?
Correct.
Would you say I've got a new boyfriend, but he's a non-graduate?
Correct. And then when after my current boyfriend, which it took me years and years and years to be able to get in a relationship, because people couldn't handle the, like my time and being gone, but also I kept running into this thing where, gay men, I did the forum in 1997. At that time, AIDS was everywhere. It was kind of a scary situation for a lot of people. And I kept running this situation where the men I would date would be in therapy or be on some kind of like antidepressant or medication. And that's a big, you can't, people who are on have health, on antidepressants, etc. For many, many years, we were told you should not recommend them to do the forum. So I kept stumbling on almost everybody I dated. I couldn't actually do the forum, which meant I couldn't really have a relationship with them. And It was a very challenging situation for me. And I finally made sense to me that if you're a healthy gay man and you've been through like my current partner was a Mormon, and you've been through this kind of hell that many people go through, of course you're in therapy. I don't think he's on one, but I think you end up, you know what I mean? But like, you're really paying attention when you're a staff member, because you would never bring a guest. You would never recommend the forum to anybody who discloses different things that are on their health warning. So I just kept running over and over and over again. And there's many things on that health warning. And we were drilled that if we do that, we could ruin our whole company. That the forum is for healthy, successful people only. And
so I mean, it's so many shades of Scientology. Scientology says it's there to make the able more able. And if you're on antidepressants, you're not allowed to do Scientology. So, but what's Landmark's explanation for this?
Well, in 2006 or 7, I think the America's Disability Act quit letting, they used to do a screening process, and then they would have a therapist have to sign off that your therapist said that you were able to do the program if you were on an antidepressant.
Okay.
They called it a TLR, a therapy letter required. So they had a screening process. But the American Disabilities Act had them have to stop that. So after that, it became a strong recommendation. So when you sign up for the forum, you get a very long 4-page legal document. It's now online, a series of terms and conditions to click off and sign. And, basically what they're saying in that is that we're not health professionals. Health is not our field. And if you fall into these camps, we recommend you not do the program. But for a staff member, if you knew someone was in those fields, you were to decline them. You were to find a way to have them see the wisdom of not doing the program.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So, but what is Landmark's explanation for why someone who's on antidepressants or SSRIs, or I'm guessing antipsychotics, that they'd be like, no. we don't want them to do the program. What's their explanation for the reason why?
We used to read a thing, and the volunteers all read this, so I don't think I'm breaking confidentiality. And it went like this: knowing as in being, whatever that means, knowing as in being that the enterprise, that landmark, that our own future is at stake. You need to check people's well-being, but does that make sense?
But why is the future of the organization at stake if they let someone who's on antidepressants possibly do the forum?
Well, by the way, going on antidepressants as a staff member you could do it nowadays because legally they can't tell you not to do it. But that's a big no-no. I mean that you would be. I have probably a mild form of ADHD, and when I was dealing with that, after I had a tragedy in my life, and I was working with a therapist, I was very nicely coached to not go down the route of medication. I think it's because what they say is it's about being responsible. People who choose to go on medications, what I was told, is that they're choosing to not be responsible for their well-being, that they're taking like an easy route. That is not, I don't think you'd hear that in 2024 from anybody because I think they'd get nailed for it. And I think they have maybe, or at least they've been slapped on the wrist for it. So, but when you go higher up, those sentiments are still there.
For sure. Wow. Interesting. Okay. What about someone who just has some physical disability or even a physical handicap?
No, Landmark's not Landmark's fine with that. Landmark is not I do not find, and it would be rude to say, like for me, I was telling Rick, again, I guess I'm just poor guy. He's going to be like, if he watches this, he's just going to be like, but it was a very powerful call because he was so like this, but the call was so sensible and powerful for me. But, Landmark was a safe space to be a gay person. It was a safe space for people who do Landmark are not discriminatory type people in general. And even people who deal with mental health issues, they've matured over the decades in that conversation. But it's still, like I said, when you get higher up, there's a mentality about that. But physical disabilities, I've never ran into any aspect where Landmark gets kind of weird is when they have to pay for things for people with disabilities, because some making things accessible can be expensive. So, and my experience of working there is they're very bottom line. It's a very bottom line organization. So but they even accommodate that. Landmark people are in general good people who, I think the sentiment of the kind of person who does Landmark is a good one. That's why this conversation is tricky, because the Nexium people said, people don't join a cult, they join a good thing.
Right.
So in her book, and It's a Cult, what she really pointed out, the subtitle is Confronting the Line Between Transformation and Exploitation. And it's really this sense of once you are in, and once they know all your integrity issues, and they know what, they have all of that on you, then it becomes a matter of control. And it becomes a matter, at least in my situation, that was what I experienced. And then you're working 100 hours a week and there's no boundaries. So it's not very healthy, is another way of saying it. Does that make sense?
It does. I'll tell you, one of my first introductions to Landmark, other than Scientology, because so Scientology actually has an auditing course, an auditing action designed to fix people who did EST. Now, I think when L. Ron Hubbard created that auditing action, it's just called the EST Repair Rundown. I'm guessing Landmark had not already existed, because there's no Landmark repair rundown. There's only an Est repair
Well,
rundown.
he died before Landmark.
Well, so there you go. So I was familiar with Est from that. But then, so, you know, there's a period of my life when I started researching publicly traded companies for hedge fund clients. And I was researching a company called Lululemon. They sell yoga apparel. And it turns out that in the company Lululemon, you cannot advance to the executive ranks of this publicly traded company without being a member of Landmark and doing Landmark training. And that just struck me as really weird. As a part of that research project, I started speaking to some former senior executives of Lululemon, and I spent as much time talking to them about how weird it is that they all have to do Landmark as I did talking to them about the company Lululemon itself. Do you have anything to share on companies
Lululemon
like that?
ended that policy and relationship several years back, you know, because of complaints about them being, you know, pressured to be in the program. So there's a whole network of business relationships and licensing of Landmark's work in corporations. And there are people, it's white labeled. So people, you know, they don't know they're doing Landmark's work per se. So they license it in like a white label kind of thing where the people pay for it and then they go deliver it. And then Landmark has had some big clients like Lululemon. And in most of those situations, they tend to make a mess of it because, see, if you're doing the forum and you're doing it because your company is sending you, you might just want to be like, okay, this sounds cool. I'm a yoga person, and just sit back and be there in the weekend. But the course leaders want more from you than that. So you can't just kind of be half in when you do the weekend. You've got to be somebody who's fully engaged. And now that they do it online, it's really apparent when the company people are in there that, you know, they're just chilling out. And I think they get good things, but Landmark would never be just okay with people paying for their course, taking what they get. No, they can't stand that. If you're not raising your hand, if you're not bringing people and coming to Tuesday night, that is, you know, because the leaders, how they're measured and what their own, you know, their own career, and they've spent all these years working on it, is they have to hit numbers when they leave those weekends.
Right. Interesting. I'll tell you, a lot of what you're saying reminds me of an aspect of Scientology that I am just casually calling enforced improvement. And it's one of these things like wherever there's this broad agreement that to advance in the program or the levels of the organization is virtuous, and that in order to advance, you have to do these courses or actions or whatever. And that in order to finish an action, you have to say how wonderful it is and how much you want other people to do it as well. And then in order to be allowed to do, and if you don't say that, you're not allowed to finish the action. But if you don't finish that action, you can't do the next action. And if you don't do the next action, there's something wrong with you. And very quick in Scientology, you learn that when you finish something, you have to say it was great. You have to say you loved it. You have to say it was the greatest thing that you ever did. Because if you don't, you're not allowed to go on to the next step. And if you're not, and there's something wrong with you. I don't know. Is that a lot of what you've said just kind of reminds me of that. And I'm wondering, is there any sort of negative outcome organizationally, reputationally, if someone's not like, yeah, I want to bring 10 people, like what if someone does the thing and they're just kind of lukewarm about it?
No, they're really, you know, I mean, because Landmark is not a religion and its business structure is, it's a business. So if people are not happy with taking the course, you can call, they'll give you a refund. Even though the course is non-refundable, I've never ever turned anybody down. They're very generous about that. They will give, if people want to do a repeat, they will like, here, you can do it again for free. But they don't really, anybody who leaves because they get sick during the weekend, they could be 20 years later, they'll give you a scholarship to do it. At least up until I was there, that was the policy. And there's a very generous side to Landmark. In her book, Ann Peterson's book, which I recommend everybody get, you know, she says something, and they talked about this on the Little Bit Culty podcast too, that it is, that there's a lot Landmark does right, and there's a lot of companies. There's many ways that Landmark can be a nurturing place. So that's why some of this other stuff is so contradicts what it is, and I think people get really feel violated when it goes bad. So when it's good, it's good, and when it's bad, it's bad. And yes, if a leader, if somebody gets up and tries to question or say, that can be very bad for you. I mean, it can just you can lose your career over that if you really take on challenging things. There is they do have their way of labeling people a problem, and then and sticking by it. Yeah.
So that kind of leads me to my next question. Can anyone leave Landmark at any time without negative consequences?
Well, yeah. I mean, we don't have, yes, yes. The answer is for the most part, yes. Um, it's hard to say. Um, yes, people can leave Landmark. I've seen it happen my whole life. I think one of the things that they say that was true for me is that, so because you're part of this great community of people, you lose your community, and that can be huge for people. You know, a lot of people a lot of people who become leaders, staff members, and things like that. The threat of losing your job or being fired it's like you're losing your world or your people, and that is a very powerful thing to hold over people. But no, there is no consequence like in a traditional cult where there's disconnection or things like that. There is not that. But your friends don't quit talking to you because they're busy trying to meet their numbers, and you're not part of that game anymore. So, they might love you and wish you well, but most people will report that when they leave, whether it's 20 years, 30 years later, they'll tell you that all of a sudden all these people that are part of their life are gone.
Okay, but they're not forced to disconnect.
No, no, Landmark doesn't do any kind of thing like that.
Okay.
When I talked to Rick Ross, it was great because he's a fellow critic. I like that, but he said, that Landmark's very smart. They're smart about certain things. So no, they would never do that. They don't want to be labeled that. They don't want to have anything to do with any kind of thing like that. In fact, even even after this interview, I could get a letter from the CEO, and he would start by thanking me for who I have been for Landmark, always. So there's a dignity. Well, that's Werner Erhard's personality. That's part of his. It just gets out of control. People's grandiosity, And there's a lot of stories that have happened with people, and things can get, when you work all those hours, people have been yelled at, pushed, I was thrown against a wall by somebody. It's people are just on edge. That part is the part that I think needs to get killed, like ended. I think Landmark needs to, while these people are going to start speaking up, they could literally end it. They don't have to do any of that weird stuff.
Right.
Now what they're doing, part of the same 4-day period when I decided to quit, we were in a conference on Zoom. A conference at Landmark is always like 10 in the morning until 10 in the evening. It's never like nothing is 4 hours at Landmark. Everything is always long and intense. But they started by saying the numbers are down, so there's going to be consequences. We're not going to tell you what the consequences are, but you can figure it out for yourself. It's called, we're going to start cutting jobs. Now, we're already working all these hours, so doing it with less staff is always the answer when the performance is down. However, if you go online, I was shocked when I'm like trying to start a new business. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm in recruiting. It's fabulous. I found a really incredible people to work with. but I'm taking some training on HubSpot. I never heard of HubSpot because you're doing all these sales and everything, but you have no technology at Landmark. There's no like, we were writing down credit card numbers until 2022, everything in paper. And I don't know if that's how Scientology is as well, but for us, we never had, they don't have the technology. But anyways, going on and on about this, in my train of thought. So anyway, so I was reading, the statistic is that 78% of all buyers will research a company before they interface with it.
Okay.
This is, every company in the world has had to deal with this thing that changed for Landmark called the internet. It changed for everybody. So now what happens is that people go to share the forum and then they just go online and they hear something like this, or there's 8 million. The first, when you type it in, it says Landmark Worldwide Cult. It fills it out for you, cult. You don't even have to know or think it's a cult. It's so often put that way. So they're yelling at their staff, blaming them, and all they have to do in reality is just stop with all the MLM nonsense. It's not working. They're losing, in my opinion, they're failing but Werner Erhard created that whole thing. And I'm telling you, we call it sales on like when I'm talking with you, but that's not how it's ever represented at Landmark. See, when you work in the business, every piece you do in your job is not a doing. It's all a distinction. It's all in loaded language. And everything you do, there's a right way to do it. And when you do it that way, you will get the right results. So if you didn't get the results, you didn't do it the way it was designed. And the person who designed it is him. And he did it in 1974. And somehow everybody has to keep doing it. So you're being pressured constantly. People have lied, but like lied their ass off, like just like and they hide it, like, oh yeah, they'll call in their numbers. We registered 150 people, and then it's just a mess. Then they live in this upset that they have lied. Now they're a liar, and now they are now either going to get fired and kicked out of the community for being a liar, which is devastating for someone. So the consequences of breaking your integrity or not following the rules is huge, and it is used as a lever for their staff. So it's, if anything, even if people say, oh, it's not a cult, it's definitely one of the most toxic corporate cultures you could ever be a part of.
Yeah. Well, what you just described is exactly like Scientologists saying what L. Ron Hubbard said, which is Scientology technology works 100% of the time when applied 100% standardly. And if you did not get the result, you did something wrong. And I think there's something to be said about an organization that operates completely on the writings and dictates and beliefs of a single person, and that person's writings are considered infallible. And so that's the next question I was going to ask you, which is there some respect in which Landmark members actually worship Werner Erhard?
It's a really great question. So when he quote unquote left, they took him completely out of the conversation. Nobody discussed his name with me my first 9 years there.
Wow.
So the things that I were trained in, I was under the impression that the research and design team, and I'm sure people worked with him, but it was all his thoughts. Later, he would do this program, his own program. It was a leadership course, and this is in her book, It's a Cult, like current day Werner Erhard. And so since it started to seem like Werner's legacy was being validated, they started coming out with more and more Werner stuff. So over the last 5-6 years, everything is Werner Erhard. It's everywhere in the company. So for when I signed up, it wasn't. There was no sign of him. He was gone. And that was a huge for me, like, I didn't realize how slowly I was there. More and more, I'd be in a weekend and they'd start telling you, you need to lead a Werner Erhard seminar. So the standard is you've got to lead like this man leads. And so they start talking about Werner Erhard that way. We start reading materials of his. We start listening to recordings. And then in that very conference, this is what took me over the edge. In the very center manager workshop I was right before I left, we had to watch a video, a current video of him, and he's working directly with the people who lead the course, which, you know, he's quote unquote coaching them. He's like the coach, the consultant, but really I was left with, he was like in charge. But anyways, and if you're a landmark person, these are all really big deal things because we were trained to go in and every time people brought up his name, no, he's gone. So to have had that much influence in the organization, I found myself realizing like, wow, I have always been there. The people at the top, they are loyalists like you're talking about. They are that Werner Erhard is this brilliant, infallible human being, and we can never live up to him. And all we can do is aspire to understand where he was coming from, and you will never make it there yourself. He is the one.
I mean,
but they do not project that in any of the courses. And if you get high enough up, you start to get that that's the reality.
So I would argue that makes it a cult, but I don't say that from some particular, you know, position of authority. I wanted to ask you though, does Rick Ross consider Landmark to be a cult?
What I said earlier is he said that no, for the general consumer, it's probably not a cult. But if you get higher up, he suspects that it's just the way I stated it, and it probably is. And his opinion and my opinion is, so now that led me after all these years. So the difference is, imagine going through Scientology for 26 years, but you've never really thought much about L. Ron Hubbard. And then one day you find L. Ron Hubbard is really the whole deal at the top of the game that you've been living inside of the whole time. So then you get to go all the way back and learn about what was really going on back then, what all the controversy is, all the ways that they flipped it, spinned it, and moved it. And you start to get, oh, Werner Erhard is a smart man. I think some people, I don't know if this is how you feel in Scientology. Your guys' stories are so severe. I don't know if there's any part of you that says, well, I can see that L. Ron Hubbard was brilliant in his own way. I don't know if you see that. Werner Erhard is brilliant in certain ways, but he was also not. And
yeah, I mean, I think L. Ron Hubbard is brilliant in the way that a really, really good con man is actually quite brilliant.
Yes, and he is, you know, according to, I mean, I don't want to go right off and say that, but according to many, many, many critics, that would be Werner Erhard. I mean, I just don't, he has a certain way of being when he's with people that is really generous and caring and great. And then there's this whole other side that the company is run inside of, which is like, you know, pressure, the hours, the everything, you can never win in that system. They set up so many tasks for you to do. There's no way a person could ever do it. And you are always being held to it and you're at their mercy. And when your employment is there and that's all you've done since you were a kid, it is very hard to get yourself to, you lose your sight of understanding boundaries or where to go. And you see all these somewhat impressive people around you who are living and doing this. So it leaves you in this experience, like it's got to be you. So it just ends up, for me, what I ended up doing is just doing more. And how can I please these people? And how can I get out of trouble?
So to me, that even low to mid-level staff experience is absolutely culty. There is no reason to run people that hard, especially for free. It's one thing if you're paying them a mint. There's no reason like to put people in the frame of mind where this organization and this organization's purpose is more important than your well-being and your happiness. Like, that's insane. That is culty.
It is. And they will say it's not like that, but it is. When you sit back and really confront so many people, I could come up with about 15 in my head, having just dealing with after they leave or they had to leave because of serious health issues. In your interview with Natalie, and she was talking about being in fight or flight. that really resonated with me because I was so on edge all the time about what needed to be done. And then I read, when you get yourself to where I've been at, you start to go, okay, how did I wind up here? How is this my life, my whole entire adult life? How did it get to this? And you start to see all the people who would just, in Landmark, you can definitely leave. People just walk out. People like, fuck you. People, and you see these things all the time, but you become kind of used to it. It happens occasionally, I should say, like occasionally. And you become kind of like, well, they're on it, is what they say at Landmark. They used to send out letters like they broke their word, but they quit that. Now they say we don't say anything when someone leaves. People live at choice. But the point is that in working with a trauma therapist and starting to unpack my Landmark experience, what I really got is that I didn't know this because they teach this in one of the Werner Erhard World Seminars, but they don't do it in the context of trauma. They do it in the context of being, but there's the amygdala and the fight, flight, freeze response. But in the last 6-7 years, doctors and psychologists and all that have come up with a fourth one. They call it fawning. And it means people pleasing.
Oh, I like it.
And I started to see why I became so, how I stayed in this situation for myself was to try to make everybody happy. And I became very good at making people happy.
So
And
fight, flight, freeze,
and
fawning.
fawning. Yeah.
Wow.
And I started reading all these articles, and I just saw this, and it was so powerful because I feel like I didn't want to do this interview with you till I wasn't filled with resentment. And I do know, maybe it's my Landmark training, but I know my own responsibility. Responsibility is a huge aspect of living this Landmark lifestyle. And I felt like these people were walking all over me, and you can't be a victim. Victim is the worst thing you can be. It is, and even when I quit, it's like I'm still worried what they say to themselves about, oh well, he's being a victim. He's on this call. That's where the victims go. He's blah blah blah, or this live stream we're doing. So it was really powerful to see that in all those hours and all the press, every 2 hours, you keep your promises. You register people every 1 or every 2 hours, and you have to go back to your person and say, I did it or not. And if you didn't do it, you get dealt with. And I, by the way, was the person who dealt with people too. I'm no angel. I have to deal with all the ways that I could hurt people or pressure people in this system. And that's a hard thing to digest.
How would you deal with people?
Oh, well, I would be like, hey, Aaron, you haven't, what's up, Aaron? You promised you'd register somebody. It's 2:00. I haven't heard from you. You were supposed to get to me at 1:30.
I'm trying, Brian. I haven't done it yet. I'm trying really hard.
Okay, well, that's not acceptable. We don't try here. So what is it? What did you where's your integrity out?
Do you guys use that word out the way they do in Scientology?
Integrity out. Where's your integrity out? Everything is out.
In Scientology, it's like out ethics, in ethics or out ethics.
Like, and some people are classier about doing it than me. You get better at being holding people to account. Usually they go, I was 5 minutes late and I didn't tell anybody. Or
you have to get them to confess to you how they've been out integrity.
Yeah, where's your integrity out? Yeah, and then they confess to you, and then they usually go turn around and register someone, or somebody just comes and calls in, and it's all it's all connected. Yeah.
So it's funny, like I can see. I mean, to me, this culty way of managing people and pushing them too hard and expecting them to prioritize the organization over themselves, their lives, their happiness, their well-being. On some levels, speaking as far as cults go, I understand that if you've convinced these people that they're somehow saving the world. And
Correct.
also in Scientology, the organizations, at least they used to, make a lot of money. And they believe that that money was then being used for programs that was saving the world by getting people into Scientology and up Scientology. What is it that Landmark people believe they're accomplishing that allows them to be controlled this way and driven that hard for very little money?
Well, when I did, as I shared earlier, when I did the forum, what happened in my family, and when you start to see the masses of people have those results, you get that you could be the person, if you take a stand, you could make a future happen that wasn't going to happen anyhow. So it won't happen without you. So you get, the people who, these are dynamic, amazing people. A lot of people who worked with, I started young, and many people started young, but the people who work in this organization are all, Landmark is its whole brand is dynamic programs. So you're seeing people in how they dress, how they act, they're very fun. Landmark is people are a lot of fun. So you get, where you get it as you go along, the advanced course really nails this, is you could be you in your life, Aaron. Your life could matter. Your life could make a difference. And are you going to live an ordinary life, or are you going to be extraordinary? And extraordinary people keep their word. They are unreasonable people. There is nothing stands in their way. They do not have reasons. To have a reason.
Did they also turn reasonable into a bad word like Scientology did?
Reasonable
is bad,
is the
unreasonable.
lowest level of living. That's in the seminar manual I read.
Wow, he really did take it from Scientology. There's no way. I mean, that came from Scientology, right?
I don't know. I didn't do Scientology, but if you say so, I don't think,
Reasonable is a bad word. It means
Yes.
coming up with reasons why something can't be done or is that way, instead of being unreasonable. I will not invent excuses for, why something is
you can't.
really okay when it's not.
Excuses. Everything I'm saying to you is an excuse. I know that how this is heard by many people is everything I just said is one big excuse. And, probably I'm just on it. And I finally got a boyfriend. So now I need to go leave Landmark. I left I didn't even tell him. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't talk to a single soul. I just sent an email and said, you can email me for HR matters, but do not call me. And I didn't take anybody's phone call. And I'd like more people to have the courage to walk away. And if they're feeling like they are in over their head, or if they've started doubting, because they really do, when you get to these higher places, people, you get doubtful, and then they're very masterful at getting you to keep going. And it becomes like a vicious circle in your life.
So who runs Landmark? Who's the head of it?
Well, the CEO is Werner Erhard's brother. His name is Harry Rosenberg.
How old is he?
He's probably 70.
Oh, that's not old.
In his early
Wow.
70s, maybe.
He's young.
Werner Erhard's the oldest. We could do a whole episode on Werner Erhard. His original name was Jack Rosenberg. He changed his name according to this book. I always thought it was some kind of like woo-woo thing, like he created a new way of being for himself called Werner Erhard. But in reality, according to what has been reported by people, he left I knew this part too, but the way they put it is different than I think the way it went down. But he left his family, his children, and he married some other woman while he was still married to his wife. He just abandoned them. He just disappeared, and he created a new name and went out and started a new life for himself in San Francisco.
Wow. See, he has that in common with L. Ron Hubbard as well. They were both bigamists.
Correct. He was, according to what I read so sue him. That's what they say. And so he created this new life. And then when he was starting to get famous, he had to go back and clean it up with his family. And then his brother and sister, they hadn't seen him in years. They didn't know where he was. He went and they somehow became part of this. And his other brother runs a company that does corporate Landmark stuff. I mean, not Landmark stuff. It's not Landmark, but they do stuff. They're some kind of consultant, business consultant.
Okay, so his brother's running the show, and
he really runs it with his sister Joan. Joan runs the centers, and the centers is like the hugest part of the whole company. So she runs that. He's the CEO, so he's managing the money, the budgets, the bigger stuff. And by the way, just so we all know, and just to say it here, I still, even though I think these people are messed up, I think that they are culty, I think that they're crazy, I still, when I say their names, I still love them. I still have a real affinity for them. And I really wish they would literally, I think they have the resources, the talent, and the forum is a good enough product that they could end all of this. They could just literally act normal. They could get that company in about 6 weeks to be normal. They make it sound like it'll take a new decade. One of the things that they've been doing to us over the years, and I like that expression, doing it to us, is they come out with these things. So one year they came out with all these customer service ways, and we had to read all these documents about how now we're going to take manipulation out of registering people. So they do all these policies about how don't call people more than this, don't do this, be true like this, really get people's no if they say no, all violated. All those policies no longer exist. Then they pull out this thing they call it the brand pyramid. And they say, these are the ways we used to be, and we're no longer going to be that. We're not going to be manipulative. We're not going to be overworked. We're not going to be harsh. So you could literally lead a thing to all the people assisting where you're like, we're no longer harsh. And then you could go upstairs and your manager calls you on the phone. It's like, where the fuck is your assisting report? Your integrity's out. It's like nuts. So now they're in a new thing where they're creating another new era. And they're talking about like the future and how they want to go viral but the way they will, if they actually really are not truly trying to be a cult, they will pay their people a decent salary. They will not work them to death. They will work them 40 hours a week. They will consult with health professionals so they know how to deal with people who uncover traumatic issues, and they will be a responsible 2024 kind of company. And I think the people who are part of it need to demand that or leave. And I think the people who are customers need to see what effect this is having on people, and they need the court of opinion. At Landmark, they have this thing. I think this is great. I don't know if anybody else does, but you're drilled. You never gossip. Gossip kills. This whole call is gossip. If anybody listens to this call, that would be considered gossip.
Which call?
Sorry, I keep calling it a call because I'm on Zoom calls all day long, and I have been for like the last 4 years. This live stream, it just looks like Zoom for me. But if I watched this, that would be like gossiping. Gossiping isn't just what you say; it's what you're listening to.
Okay.
And I'd have to report this.
Report it to who?
I would have to report it to my what they call committed listener. Because if I watched this, I'd be messed up the next day. I knew I had crossed some line.
What would your committed listener do to you or with you about it?
A lot of times they're like, okay, they're like, sometimes it's not bad. Other times you could get a lecture for a good hour and a half. You could have to have a call with like 3 or 4 other people, and then they might get to the real out of integrity or find the incident back in the past that has you not be trustful. They call it dealing with you. You get dealt with.
Oh my goodness. So it's in Scientology, the word they use is natter. And It's basically just criticism, strained criticism. The Scientology kids, like the cadets, I think there was a phrase I've heard they use, like natter, natter, negative chatter. And the thing is, it's only called natter if you're doing it about someone senior to you. Seniors are allowed to natter about people junior to them, and it's never called natter. I'm wondering, so this whole, what did you call, no gossiping? Was that a one-way street? Like would
It's
senior
actually
members?
a really healthy thing in like normal life. It's very healthy. You know, like in a family, it doesn't work to call all your siblings and talk about the other siblings. So there's value in not gossiping. I'm not like condoning things that may be unhealthy. However, they don't. No, at Landmark, if you talk negatively about anybody, you're gossiping. So
even at the higher levels, did you see them holding themselves to that standard even at the higher levels?
No, they gossip all over the place about people.
That's what I'm wondering.
That's what I saw. I heard horrible things about people, and they don't call it gossip. It's all in their rationalization. They're talking about what the situations are, but they're nasty and they get in views of people. And if you cross somebody, you can really be in a tough situation for yourself. You can end up, it's not as immediately because you're always believing it's you. So you already believe it's you. But if they get a bug up their butt about you, you could really have a hard time.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how many members of Landmark would you guess there are in the United States or in the world?
Well, we don't call it members, but there's 3 million people have taken the program since 1950.
Oh, okay, sure.
I mean 1971 or whenever the S training came. Every year, I think statistically up until the pandemic, so for about 20 years, it was about 75,000 people worldwide did the course itself, the forum.
For the first time?
For the first time. Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know the answer to that question. A lot of people, because you can come and go in Landmark, it's like once you're a graduate, you're always a graduate. So many people become part of a community. And even if they quit participating, they kind of always have that Landmark bond. It's very powerful.
So, but if you had to estimate how many people worldwide annually are active members, whether like who might, I guess that depends on how the organization defines active members, but whatever's going through your head right now, what number might you guess?
It's hard to tell in the current state since the pandemic, but overall,
before the pandemic.
Overall, I probably, when you add up every person and you have the new people, there's probably a good 125,000, 150,000 people actively participating.
That's incredible. I mean, that makes it, there's definitely not more than 30,000 active Scientologists, or even anyone who would even call themselves a Scientologist in the entire world. I'm still, I can't get past the idea that it seems like this organization doesn't actually make money. Let me ask you another question. How many staff members or above? Is there anything above a staff member?
Yeah, a staff member is everybody almost everybody. 95% of people who have employment with Landmark are staff members. So staff member, you could be the receptionist and you're a staff member. You could lead the forum. So the forum leaders would travel to a different city every weekend, and they're a staff member too. So everybody who is, and that's they call it a distinction. So being a staff member is, you may have a title, but at the heart of it is that you're a staff member. So a staff member is versatile, and you can, you could shift, because one of the agreements of being a staff member is that you will do whatever's wanted and needed.
Just like a SEERG member.
Right.
Okay, so you said 95% of people who have employment with the organization.
I could be wrong in that statistic, but most people who have employment, maybe it could be a little lower, but most people are what is considered a staff member.
Who are the other people?
They might be on contract for some reason, or they might like there are people who do not get like health benefits, etc., because they are like a 1099 person.
I see. I see.
Yeah.
How many staff members worldwide would you estimate Landmark has?
Now, probably maybe like 400.
400 staff members.
Mm-hmm.
That's nothing.
Yeah, because the whole company is run by people assisting. And in North America now, by their Landmark Leadership Academy.
So when you say the word staff member, you mean they're actually getting paid?
Yeah, staff member means you are there 70, 80, 90, you know, the tagline is 70, but it ends up becoming much more than that.
Okay, so if there's only 400 staff members, how many people would you estimate are volunteers for the organization worldwide?
I think I'm gonna throw out a guess, but I think it was probably averaged around, let's see, there's 40, and then some have up to 1,000. I don't know, 10 to 15,000 people.
Wow.
And many of those assisting people, those their roles are what most people would consider a job, a full-time job.
Wow. It seems like the organization is much more efficient than Scientology. That's for sure.
It's a very efficient organization in a lot of ways. It's a very
and I mean
inefficient.
personnel wise, not necessarily revenue wise, because it still seems like this organization doesn't make any money.
It's designed not to. They made it well, like it's the 100. I think in 2019, the gross income, this is all public, was something like $100,000, $100 million, and then $100 million, but the profit was something like $4 million.
Where's the money going?
Well, the biggest expenses was their the physical real estate in leasing all these offices around the world, and the forum leaders and the leaders, they traveled. So Landmark never wanted that what I was told. The thinking was that the forum, they didn't want people to identify with one person. Like if they had a course leader in one city, then that whole group would be around that personality. So they mixed it up. So if you were a forum leader, you would fly every weekend. Their schedule is brutal. They would start in a city. They'd fly into a city on a Thursday morning. Then they would lead the course Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They always worked on Monday. They had to come in late, like 11 is, they come in late, then they'd work and do calls. And then on Tuesday, they'd have their evening session. And that could be like 500 people in a big ballroom. Then they'd get up first thing in the morning, fly to another city, lead a big introduction, and then turn around and do it in another city. So they would do that for like on a 3-week rotation and then take a week off. Of which they had calls and they actually worked on.
So it seems to me that the entire organization operates on the purpose of your life can have meaning, and it can have meaning by transforming people's lives by having them do this for them. Our programs are our courses, seminars, whatever you call them. And there's no greater purpose. Does Landmark push any kind of a belief in a higher power or a supreme being or anything like this? Do they tend to not believe in a higher power or a supreme being?
Yeah, they do not.
Really?
Landmark is very diverse. You can sit there in a course. You can be sitting next to a Muslim woman on this side, a Jewish woman on that side. It's very diverse, all backgrounds.
Oh, so when you said they do not, I thought you meant they do not believe in a supreme being.
They do not. There is no supreme being. I don't know if individual people believe in whatever they believe.
Well, that's what I meant. I'm sorry. It's one thing to say they don't talk about a supreme being, but do they believe there isn't one? Is that part of the?
No, there's no conversation about supreme beings.
Okay. So whereas Scientology pretends that you can be a Scientologist and a Christian and a Muslim, for Landmark, it's actually true.
At Landmark, you're the supreme being.
But that's true for Scientology as well.
Yeah, but I mean, no, nobody uses the word supreme being. It's more like, but landmark is more like you are the author of your life. You are, I think people might say something like you're God in your own universe. I think that was more of an SD kind of sentiment. I think they kind of killed that out to be a professional seminar producing organization. But there's no supreme, there's no, you can get to a level of enlightenment maybe in through participating, but they don't talk about it in a spiritual or kind of like bigger context.
Was there ever a cultural thing where the higher level landmark staff members just where it was almost like culturally they looked down their nose at people who believed in a supreme being or organized religion?
I was never left with that. No.
Interesting. That's very interesting. I think it's important. I mean, I think that's meaningful that you were never left with that, because there's so many things in Scientology that are cultural. Like no one ever sits you down and says, you're like, there's not like a specific course or auditing action where someone sits you down and tells you that you can't believe in a higher power. But it is wholly inconsistent with the beliefs of Scientology to believe in a supreme being or a heaven or a hell or in a prophet or anything. So in a very real level, it's just not possible to be a Scientologist and believe in any other organized religion. Now, that has not prevented Louis Farrakhan's Nation of Islam of become many of members of that organization have become Scientologists, even though it's not possible. So something is happening that I'm saying isn't possible, and there's something to explore there. But I think you know what I'm talking about, right? Like
landmark people will tell you that out of their participation, most of them will tell you that whatever their God or their higher power is, it helped them get closer to it. It's there's like, again, landmark. I think landmark holds the line in being too weird, and I think the eccentricities of its founder get all over the business operations and are unhealthy and are culty and definitely high control. And they could change it, because there is a lot of good in the organization, and but you also have to deal with, why would they not give you informed consent? How do you get sucked into this thing and then find out as it goes on more and more truths, more, you find yourself, the deeper you get in situations that you learn about things like the fact that this man left his family. I find out about that after I'm already responsible for all these people in my programs and everything around me. That's not informed consent. And then you have to kind of deal with yourself, like, what is this? And you kind of make peace with it and you move on. And then there's another effed up thing. And then you have to work it out. And you kind of go, I trust them. And they're usually so they act in this kind of level-headed manner. So you kind of go, okay. And then at some point, it's like, for me and Stephen Hassan, who I believe you talked about his book.
I've spoken to him a couple times on my channel too.
He's amazing. And he said, it could just be that this group is lying to you, and that's enough. And for me, that was enough when I could feel it in my bones that something was not being said, and I was being asked to do things that were not truthful. And I don't know if it was like this big international, like they're going to do a vow documentary on it, but so many people have been led to that. Then they spend their life doing all this, and then they didn't change the whole world. The company kept going down. They were being pressured the whole time, and you're left in this spot like, wow, how did I get here?
Right.
And so all the stuff everybody's saying in these other, they say it's good to listen to the other groups talk. I can't relate to some of the things you went through growing up in Scientology. However, I do believe many of the people's children who their parents were this consumed can completely relate to what you're talking about.
Oh, children of parents who were wrapped up in Landmark for their whole lives.
Yes.
Oh, that would be
There is
interesting.
some have fine experiences with that. Others have real resentments. Their parents weren't around. On the TV show Weeds, I don't know if you've ever seen that. They do a great rip on Landmark, and this girl is like smoking a joint, and she's like 12, and she's like, "Yeah, my mom's at the hotel doing her Landmark forum," you know. And we hear all these things, and we kind of, when you're in the inside, you kind of laugh it off, and you kind of learn. The S training started with Werner Erhard walking out going, "You're an asshole and your life does not work." And it was radical. And in the 70s, it went on fire and it just spread. I mean, it went viral, like what we call viral now. It was huge. I live in Minneapolis, and I'm a huge, this shows me being gay and being totally just a wackadoodle, but I'm a huge Mary Tyler Moore Show fan. And she was in Minneapolis. She lived right down the street from where the house is. Literally, I go by it when I go running. And the whole cast did it. He ended up having some kind of relationship with Cloris Leachman, who was one of the Diana Ross. My cousin told me, my cousin's partner said he wanted to ask and do assisting so he could be in a phoning to register people so he could sit next to Diana Ross. I mean, this was like a huge thing that went down, but it was controversial from the minute he said hello, because he started. So Werner Erhard has this really irreverent, awesome kind of, so you feel like when you said the thing about you're in the cool cult, you feel like you're part of this cool thing, and everybody, the rest of the world just doesn't quite get it. Like they're on the ordinary end, and you're on the right side. And so then so it's not all bad. It just, they really do a bad job in how they leave people. And there is a lot of evidence that there are people who get messed up by it, which I assume happens in Scientology as well.
Yeah. I keep cracking up because of Magic Mike's comment here. You're an asshole and your life doesn't work. Sounds like my ex.
Wow. All right. Well, this wasn't quite the call I thought we were going to have, but I loved it. I really appreciate the opportunity to express myself. I said a lot of things here I would never say, and I'm cool with it. Is there anything other questions you have or anything?
Do you want to go through? Well, I have some I have
Yeah,
started a whole bunch
that's
of
great.
comments.
Go ahead.
But one last question I wanted to ask is there any part of the Landmark programs or courses or seminars or whatever that focuses on certain people that you should cut out of your life? Is there any part of the program that tends to be destructive to families?
No, Landmark is,
other than spending 1 million hours working for the
that's
organization.
the only thing that, I mean, at my age, I have Landmark is about bringing in the forum, you get closer to your family. Now, 6 Feet Under did several episodes about one of the main characters, Ruth, the mom, doing what was 100% a rip on the Landmark forum. And in her course she's watching, they tell her, this woman gets up and goes, "Well, my father, he's basically, I'm laughing because they're making so much fun of Landmark, but that the woman's father set her on fire." And the instructor coaches her to go and apologize to her father. So where Landmark gets problematic is that they coach you to go get closer with your family, but there are certain situations in life where it would be unhealthy and possibly for people who've experienced different issues, it could be damaging for them to do that. But overall, for the general person, Landmark brings you closer to your family, and it's a good thing. It was for mine.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So here's some of the things that I have starred. Some of these have actually already been answered, so I won't pull them up. Okay. Kate Taylor says, I've done most of Landmark's courses. When I left, I found myself listening to SPTV because I had nowhere else to get a debrief of what had happened. Having said that, I did get a lot from it. When I see a comment like this, I mean, there's a lot of people who will say the same thing about Scientology, that well, like you said, nobody joins a cult. They join what they think is a helpful organization. The same thing is true for Scientology. Nobody who joins Scientology thinks they're joining a cult. They join it because they think that they hope to get something out of it. They usually do a little thing and then you sometimes get something out of it and then, seek more. And it's funny because if you're a Scientologist, you use the positive aspects or the positive experiences that you've had in Scientology to justify or explain away all of the terrible things. But for me, I found it took me having a lot of time and distance from Scientology to stop always having to explain that it's not all bad. Nothing is all bad. Like that's almost like when I started doing my videos early on, I felt I had a whole lot of attention on making sure that my content would not be offensive to someone that was still in Scientology. And so I just felt the need to always explain that, well, of course, there's positive parts of it. And because in my mind, that's what a Scientologist would focus on. Yes, there's some parts of it that people find helpful. And, the lower levels are more helpful than the upper levels, that kind of stuff. Right. But I think I just have stopped feeling the need to explain that it's not all bad. Nothing is all bad. And the fact that it has some good parts doesn't actually excuse the horrendously abusive parts. And at the end of the day, it's all a con anyway. Now, that's something I say that's true for Scientology. It seems like you may not necessarily feel that way about Landmark. Like it doesn't sound like you're saying it's all a con.
I think that it is, well, look, I'm new on my unpacking journey, and I may end up where you're at about it. I'm not saying that, but they say, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. But, look, there are people, I had once my committed listener one time called me because I didn't, they have home introductions and I didn't schedule one. So it's an introduction in someone's home. So people have people over for coffee and they invite their friends and family, kind of like a Tupperware party. And that's a big part of the business model, is all these home introductions. And they needed to quit. Well, they now do more like one-on-one Zoom calls. But anyways, so I didn't schedule the introduction. And it was a Saturday and I wanted to get to the movies. So I was going to sneak out without doing it. And, my committed listener got me on the phone for like 30 minutes. And, I was called a fat, lazy faggot. I have all sorts of stories like that. When I say emotional abuse, I mean it. I don't know if I've ever I've said something that awful to someone, but people, that environment, see, this guy, Werner Erhard, the evil side or the dark side is he is a complete narcissist. So you do not, he flips out on you. What I didn't tell you is, so that right before I quit, we had to watch a video of him in current time at age 88, working with the people who lead the forum. And we had to watch it 5 times during this workshop to see his brilliance. And during that, he snaps at this lovely man and he says, "I don't give a fuck what you think." And it was just like this look in his eye. And the next day, so I'm already questioning things, but I'm pretty good. The next day, it's my Sunday, right? And after a big weekend like that, you just kind of veg out. You have to decompress. So we turn on Netflix. And a lot of Landmark people watch this stuff and they're just like, "Oh, isn't that interesting? Aren't we glad we're not in a cult?" And we turned on this movie called Twin Flames Universe. And it's online. So now Landmark's online. So their whole cult is online. And I'm watching as their leader, and this woman challenged him, and he spoke the exact same way with the same look in his eye as Werner Erhard did 5 times in this video, and it chilled my shit. And I was just like, this way this man gets this temper tantrum, throw things physically, can be physically violent, is reported by many people. This way is all over the entire, what they would call clearing of the entire company. And it has existed. So the fish stinks at the top of the head is an expression they use. And that way, I don't care if it's 99% great. That's like saying, oh, my husband is wonderful to me 99% of the time. He only beats me 1% of the time. The 1% of the time cancels out the 99% of the time. So if these people are really committed to actually not being a cult and being an actual business, they need to eradicate this way that's running through their organization. And I believe that they believe he is some kind of, they wouldn't call it a God, but he is the ultimate. And so I believe they double down on his teachings, thinking, and ways of acting and treating people. And they're blind to it. And it is absolutely culty, for sure.
Yeah, the way you're describing this organization being run, to me, 100% makes it a cult, regardless of. To me, what defines the organization is how it is at its innermost core or at the highest levels. I've heard the argument made the opposite way, that no, an organization is defined as by the experience of the greatest number of the members, and the greatest number of members are at the bottom, and that's really what it means to have the real Scientology experience. And I go, no, the real experience, or whether something is or is not a cult, is the culture at the innermost or the highest most levels, what it is at its essence, at its purest. And I'm sorry, the Landmark sounds like absolutely a cult, even if doing the Landmark Forum for a weekend does not mean you joined a cult.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking all this time. When people watch it from my world, maybe they can start distinguishing that for themselves and not put up with it.
Okay, yeah. Yes, indeed. Because I think what I would say here is, at least this is my opinion of Landmark. If you are just doing the forum or doing the seminars, you haven't joined the cult. You join the cult when you become a staff member.
Or a leader.
Or a leader.
Because the leader doesn't get paid, remember?
Oh,
but
that's one of the
they're just
volunteers.
equally
The volunteers.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't
Right.
call it volunteer, you get in trouble. But anyways, keep going with people's stuff.
Okay, Scientology Money Project. This is Jeff Augustine. I think he had a lot of experience with EST. Werner Erhard was a grade 4 release in Scientology. Okay.
I have no idea what that means, but I believe you.
It's one of the highest grades of the lower grades. He says, outrageous betrayal. Is that the book you showed?
Yeah.
Was commissioned by Scientology's Office of Special Affairs as a hit piece on Werner. The author had access to OSA files. Now, that's very interesting. Now, one of the things about OSA's files is OSA's files are not necessarily full of false information. They could be. Usually, OSA's files is full of true information that they consider to be blackmail. And then, of course, when they put that information out in the public, they will twist it and alter it and make it much worse. But that's very interesting, Jeff. We should have a chat about how this is about this. Jeff also says L. Ron Hubbard ordered a fair game campaign on Werner in 1972, the same year that he wrote the Snow White program. The Snow White program is the infiltration of the United States government by Scientology. Jeff says Werner was a big fan of Heidegger's phrase, language lives in the house of being. What does that mean?
So the fundamental principle of the work that's done at Landmark is ontological, which is the philosophical domain of being. So what Landmark is about is who you're being in relationship to yourself as a human being. You're not a human doing, Aaron. You're a human being. And so there's the beingness of being human. So Heidegger breaks this all down and creates things like possibility. And, that you are not who you wound up being, who you consider yourself to be. You are a being, and you can be any way you want to be. You can create it because you have language. So if you said to yourself when you were 7, I'm stupid, because you raised your hand and go, oh, Abraham Lincoln, but everybody else said it was George Washington was the answer. So everybody laughed at you. You say, I'm stupid. So you said that. So since you said that in language, it doesn't really exist. So you can let go of that and you could create any way of being. So who we know ourselves to be as human beings is from language. So language is the most powerful thing we have. And there's a lot of actual scientific proof that goes with that. However, why does Landmark then create loaded language? Because language is a powerful tool and it creates a mind control type, however you want to call it, phenomenon in groups of people.
Very interesting.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Lights Camera Act says I was harassed and had to say no many times before they stopped bugging me about it, whether it was strangers calling me or my friends that were in it. Does that ring true?
Absolutely.
Okay, Lisa Love
of course,
says,
if she reported who that person is, the person would get in a lot of trouble because, we don't really do that. Just the person did that, even though there's tens of thousands of stories like that. Go ahead.
Lisa Love says, I'm curious how strong Landmark education is after all this time. They used to fill rooms by the hundreds not that long ago. Is Landmark Education what the organization is called, or is that like a sub-organization?
It used to be called Landmark Education, and I'm not quite clear what Lisa is saying because it used to be called Landmark Education. The company has changed its name about 6-7 times in its history. It usually has to do with different, I believe, LLC arrangements in their business structure. But Landmark is how strong Landmark Education is after all this time. They did used to fill rooms by the hundreds. They don't continue to have rooms. They have it online, and I don't believe their participation online matches their levels that it did when it was in person. Not yet. They're committed to it getting back.
All right. Lisa Love also says they don't recommend it. This had to do with the antidepressants issue. They do not recommend it because they know how vulnerable people can suffer from their techniques, and they do not want lawsuits. It shows you how dangerous it can be. What is the aspect of the forum that is dangerous enough that they do not want potentially mentally unstable people involved? Like, what's going on there?
Well, part of the accusation, so Landmark would tell you there's nothing wrong. But what people could take them to court for is, first of all, you're in a room with a bunch of people, and it could go for hours. They started capping it and ending each day at 10:30. But it used to, when I did it, it went to midnight. It could go later. The S training would go till like 3 a.m. So if you are sleep deprived and you're in this high state, if you are, if you can't go home, you can't go to bed, you could have a psychotic break. So there's certain people have already existing preconditions as well. By the way, all the stuff I said about well-being and how you have to follow that, it's all the well-being policies for Landmark are run through the legal office. So they're not, what she's saying is somewhat correct, because you are doing that because one lawsuit could take the whole company down.
Got it.
And you're not going to be the person who did that to the company.
Right. Show Me Your Kitties says, are they allowed to look outside the bubble? Yeah. So you mentioned that you're not allowed to gossip or to speak negatively about generally other people. Are you allowed to look online about any criticism or negativity about Landmark? What would happen if someone finds out that you're doing that?
Well, I need to go dial back what I said. If it came across like gossip is a part of your integrity and your word, but it's not like nobody would ever say you're not allowed to do anything at Landmark. They don't. I mean, they might say you're not allowed to sexually harass somebody like a normal company would, but they would never say you're not allowed. It's a teaching. It's a principle to not gossip. It's not on. But that
means you're not. That means you're not allowed to.
Correct. And Landmark wouldn't, but Landmark would never say you can't go on the internet and look at something. They don't.
But if they found out that you did, though, are you getting handled by your dedicated listener? Your
committed listener? If in my personal experience, no. I think, no, I don't know. It's not like that. It's just not like they don't control you in what you think about the outside world. You're allowed to have opinions about any topic. You can have Republicans sitting next to Democrats. You can have, like I said before, Jewish people sitting next to Muslims. So when you look outside the bubble, if there's too much of that going on, I mean, this is just my experience. Let me see. If people, yeah, I think they might say something to kind of encourage you not to, but they wouldn't tell you directly like you'd be breaking a rule to do it, if you did it. Does that make sense? Like they would never, their whole deal, there's a certain like fairness attitude that comes with everything. So how you get gaslit at Landmark is when you say, well, you say not gossip, and they go, oh, well, really, you're the problem with that. And then they take you down that direction. So, well, I was looking online, and they go, oh, really? So you believe everything online?
Okay, so they're trying to handle you, but you're
They'll
saying you don't
handle
necessarily
it.
get in trouble.
You won't get in trouble. That would not. They have to follow the law. They can't. They're a company. They can't.
Well, it's not illegal to discourage people from reading negative info about the organization.
Yes, I mean, but discouragement is different than allowed to, or to have a rule about it.
But it's not. I don't think it is.
Maybe I could be wrong. I mean, even if your state localized cannabis use, you were not allowed to use it, even if you're a volunteer.
Even if it's a medical.
Oh, if it's a medical thing, maybe you could prove that. But in most situations, or a spiritual thing, I knew a lot of people running around in ayahuasca stuff, and they claimed it as a religious thing. But besides that, no, you can't do that, and that made no sense to me. I think they didn't want the image in the world to be, because they come from a hippie generation. They didn't want it to be like we are all these wild people, lit up and toking it.
Okay, so it sounds like even if maybe they're going to give you a pep talk about perhaps it's not great.
Well, right now with this book, that what they would do is they'd say something more like, we're right now, because Anne wrote this book, Landmark's not a perfect organization, and we're working on fixing some of the issues addressed, and we disagree with others, and you can go down that road if you want to, but that Ann Peterson wrote this book, Is It a Cult?
Oh, okay.
It just came out. It's very good. It's on Amazon. And so now I'm sure what they're saying to people is, they always take kind of like a diplomatic way. It kind of eases people from feeling controlled. And then they have a way of getting you to kind of stay on board, that it's not all as dramatic as everybody makes it. And that's kind of how the whole thing stays going. I don't know if you're getting that vibe from this whole thing.
I get it. All right, here's a little thing I'm going to ask the people in the live chat to do while we pull up the rest of the questions that I've started. Based on what you've heard us discuss, in your opinion, would you describe Landmark as a cult? Yes or no? Let me know in the live chat. Okay, next one here. Okay, Acupunk says he considered Werner Erhard. He considered himself God and source of Landmark infallible. What's your take on this?
That's correct.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not him, but from what I've read and heard and gotten from people, correct.
Interesting. Priscilla Isles said, would love to come on Growing Up in Scientology to talk about Landmark and One Taste. Have you heard of One Taste? You know what that is?
No, I have no idea what that is.
Okay. Yeah, Priscilla, you can email me at growingupinscientology@gmail.com. Okay, Randy Pinball says, the first thing you learn at EST is the truth believed is a lie. What in the hell does that mean? Is that a Landmark thing, or is that just EST?
Well, there's nothing to believe here. We don't have a belief system. There's nothing to believe.
Oh, so the idea is the truth is the truth. It doesn't need to be believed. If it's something that you're believing, then it's a lie.
Correct.
Wow, that's deep. That's also very weird. Like, it's almost like, but because also anyone who'd be saying that is also presenting to you what they want you to see as the truth, but want to convince you that they're not just asking you to believe it. It's true just because it's true.
Believe is a word, like, at least from what I understand, if you said I believe something, that's like saying you have a reason for something. We don't believe things around here. This isn't a belief system.
That is pure manipulation. Okay. Jeff Augustine says, Werner Erhard, you can have your reasons or your results. Now get off it, Brian. I don't get it. What does this mean? What does this mean?
Because you know, the whole way we work is you keep your word, you cause your result, and if you're not having the results, you need to get off it, which is why my whole mission is Landmark's either a cult or they need to get off it. That's my whole opinion. Like, you either are all these things that are comparable to all these other organizations, or you need to get off of it and admit Werner Erhard was wrong. If that's your choice.
What does get off it mean?
Okay, so it's actually, I still get off it.
Is this an actual like landmark phrase?
Yes, the term means that when you hold on to a point of view and you're only willing to see the world from that point of view, you're on it. So you could say that since I was not happy.
That's a bad thing.
Well, being on it is you're on it, and how is that going to help you, Aaron?
It's a bad thing. I'm just clarifying. This is a negative phrase.
It's negative, because if you're right, if you're going to hold on to being right, that your wife should be more loving with you, and well, you're on it. I mean, you know, what is getting right going to get you? So you get off it. Just get off it. She's going to be the way she is. Let her be. Get off it.
Interesting.
If you don't have the results, you're on it. Go cause something. You can have reasons or you can have your results. So people who work in like a stock brokerage love this shit. I mean, it is like slam, bam, thank you, ma'am. And you know, when you start calling in and causing your results and your registrations and you're on a roll, that can be some great stuff. And if you're not, you're on it. So it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter how messed up the situation. It doesn't even matter if they're lying to you. You're on it. So I'm on it. I'm on this whole 2 hours and whatever means Brian is on it. It's our version of being a suppressive person. You know him. He got on it. He quit. He got on it.
This is such a funny phrase.
It's fabulous. Actually, but you know, sometimes, like, I don't know. I mean, there's valid. All these things are valid in a normal, like, healthy way. But they can all be used for manipulation. It could go either direction.
Totally. Eve Barney says, I was in EST for years. It was very abusive and damaging. Like Scientology, that was my fault. I can't tell you how deep this went, but to find out it's not really gone is very disturbing. This is why I relate to SPs.
Thank you.
Do Landmark members, are they fully aware that Landmark came from EST?
Oh, yeah. We all know that.
Are they also fully aware that EST came from Scientology?
No, we just, I still, every time you say it, I'm like, okay, you say that. I can't, because I'm so trained. I don't have any, I've never done the research to get myself clear about that. So I don't know for sure, but clearly people say it does. And it used to be common knowledge that it was. My therapist said to me that used to be common knowledge. Maybe it isn't common knowledge. So part of my whole beef is that they did a good job at having not giving me all the information, but people would bring up EST from time to time. And really what we would say is, well, it was in the 70s and it was really a big thing. And it kind of died when disco died. And now we took the best of that and turned it into a professional organization. That's the way you would represent that when you're talking to the public or your family.
Interesting. Indigo Twin says, thank you for sharing your story, Brian. It amazes me how many people take a good idea for self-help and twist it to manipulate others. Break the cycle and break the silence.
It's beautiful because the self-help industry is unregulated. So in the Is It a Cult book, which I keep promoting, just because I was riveted by it, it's really easy read too, but where she ends up is a commitment. There's an organization called Seek Safely. So this group of people, their family members were killed in a sweat lodge incident in Arizona as part of a self-help spiritual organization in 2009. And so they created this non-for-profit called Seek Safely. It's for seeking people like me who were seeking something, but to create a way in which people do that and they don't get themselves in these dangerous situations. Some kind of regulation and agreed upon conditions when it comes to self-help.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Tina Kerwan, welcome as a new channel member. And Eat More Pizza, thank you for gifting 5 channel memberships. And last but not least, Tim. Hey, all. I'm Brian's boyfriend. He was super nervous about this. So thanks to all of you for listening and for your support.
I just paced the house all day. I couldn't get anything done. I'm like, I'm gonna get fired. I don't know what I'm doing. I was like, but I just felt that I really, this meant the world. Landmark meant the world to me. So to have to change my attitude on it and change my mind after receiving more information was a huge upset. And it's going to take a while to get it, to get it all worked out for myself.
That makes sense. So what do you feel is what is the message? Is your message is your message more for people who are still working or volunteering for Landmark, or is it more for people who are considering doing Landmark? And
well, there's so many
message...
people about doing Landmark that all you have to do is there's a million YouTube videos for people like, I went to this introduction, it was crazy. So, I would not recommend doing Landmark at this point until I don't believe in being a part of any organization that is going to do these things. And I understand I was a part of that, so I have to deal with that for myself. But I drew the line when I felt it had been like when I don't know, I think you guys, Leah Remini, all these things you guys talk about, like when you kind of woke up, and that's how I feel about it. I would love to believe that the people who run Landmark really do care and that the program really does have a place, because it made such a difference, and that will never go away for me, what the difference the program made for me. But I would like the people who stand by it kind of blindly to, this might be political and I don't mean to be an asshole, but I'm a gay person. I don't eat at Chick-fil-A. Okay. I mean, they went after gay people. I'm like, done. I'm sure it's great. Everybody else loves it. And I often think it'd be great to have chicken and waffle fries. But I mean, people that they don't have to, if they love this place, they think it's worth it, then put your consumer dollars where they matter and don't pay and participate while these things are not corrected. And don't buy another line that it will be someday, one day. And I think that would be really cool. I'm afraid to find out that it really is underneath it all mind control. And I still keep having, every day I wake up and I go, it hits me harder, like, oh, you were really in a messed up situation. This really is worse than you think. And I hear stories that people call me and tell me about things that happen to them that make me cry. And I'm not talking about them here because they're their stories, not mine. But it's more brutal than what I've shared for people who've been through it. So in that level, I think the message is and then I know the people who are working there and volunteering, if you don't want to be there, if you're talking to yourself, I invite you to do what I did. Just end it. Go. Because they're really good at sucking you back in for as long as they possibly can, and to control the narrative of your leaving, so they can be regarded as like an organization where anybody can leave. Just go. That's my message. It's a line I've drawn. So I don't know if does that answer your question?
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Now you're starting a YouTube channel, or you already have
Yes,
started?
yes, I'm going to start. Well, I think so. We'll see how this went. Um, but the name of it is going to be Leaving Landmark, I believe, and it's just going to be, giving people I'm going through this Leaving Landmark, so why not do it publicly? And why not create a platform for other people to share and who have been through what I've been through. What's so inspiring that you're doing, I was watching you yesterday and you're all broken up about your guys' protests, and it was so moving. And I think what's happening here is so inspiring with the Scientology community. And I start to see that if I start speaking, and then somebody in Australia starts a YouTube channel, and then somebody in India does, and then somebody in Europe does, and we can actually either Landmark, they can just, people won't put up with their crap anymore, or something will happen. Because the nice thing about Landmark being a business and not a religion is it doesn't have tax exempt status. It doesn't have billions of dollars that it's hoarded from people. And Werner Erhard, in his smarts and in his, if he wanted to do that, he should have created a religion. But instead, the market we have the ultimate when you have in Landmark, you have committed lines of speaking. So you're supposed to go to your committed listener, and then if you can't get something resolved, you go to their committed listener. And then if you can't get that resolved, you have to go to the CEO. And if you can't get that resolved, it's like, okay, you go to the board of directors. Well, I realized at the higher level, I've been going to all these people. I went to the president with most of this right before I left. I went high. I didn't go all the way to the board of directors, but I realized there's a higher place. They always say there isn't one. It's called the court of public opinion.
I love it. I absolutely love it. We spoke earlier about how most people can just leave and there's no real negative consequences. But we also had a conversation before earlier today about people being really afraid of being sued by Landmark. So what's going on there?
Okay, well, when you speak out, if you call Landmark a cult directly, there have been people that have been sued for many, many years because because people can leave freely, it doesn't meet the criteria of the definition of being a cult.
But there's no legal criteria. That's just people's academic opinions and things like that.
I don't know the answer to that,
But
Aaron. I haven't been involved in the lawsuits, but the woman who wrote a book called Cults in Our Myths, and she was she was like pre-Stephen Hassan. Her name was Margaret Singer, and she was very renowned for her work. She included Landmark in her book, and she got sued. Really, she almost went bankrupt from it. And she had to give a retraction, which we all know at Landmark because it's part of our corporate questions and answers to be able to say, no, she said it wasn't a cult. So see, since she was sued, she said, I never, and she never actually, she called it a potentially harmful group. So she could authentically say, no, I never did call it a cult, but she said that publicly. And then we could use that to say, no, she never called it a cult. So calling Landmark a cult has gotten a lot of people, especially when they publish things, or they do things like this. It could be libelous. It could be, so people run into issues with that. The other litigious things that come up from this is there's a whole group of people who we all sign legal agreements. So one of the other things is that when you the whole time you're on staff or work with Landmark people and you're a program leader, you're not allowed to do business with other people who are also Landmark people. And you're also, I'm under a 3-year, I don't think it can be held, but I could be challenged. So all my training is coaching people, but I'm in a 3-year non-compete agreement to not be able to do my own profession.
Huh. Interesting.
And so what happens is they can't uphold these things, but every friend I know who goes out and they do like, I'm going to be a business consultant or I'm going to go do this, they get a cease and assist and they have to start dealing with Landmark's legal department. And if I said anything here that was like me trying to coach everybody in the technology of Landmark, I could get sued for that as well. So it's super litigious, and you have to watch what you say.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, Werner Erhard, or who's his brother?
Earhart, like Amelia
Earhart.
Earhart. Yeah, Earhart.
What's his brother's name?
Harry Rosenberg and Joan Rosenberg.
Harry and Joan Rosenberg.
Mhm.
Harry and Joan, I'm looking right at you. Even if people like taking your form, I think your organization is a cult, and you're welcome to sue me if you want.
Oh, you're so funny. I Good luck,
You and
Aaron.
Grant,
I told him before this. I'm like, don't say that. I don't think you should say that.
Harry, Joan, and Grant Cardone can all take a number and get in line.
I get it. All right, good. Well, is there anything else?
No, this was a blast. Thank you so much for coming on. I know this was a big deal for you, but it's also a big deal for me. I've really been wanting to have this conversation for a while. So thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for creating this platform and everything everybody's doing in dealing with these groups. And definitely, I'm blown away by what you're doing. I still think Scientology is worse. But because I hear all these stories, you guys win the prize of being the most fucked up, I think. But anyways, but I'm moved. I'm so blown away by your relentless campaigning and what you're doing. It's inspiring. And I think it's going to make a huge difference across all these kinds of organizations. And Aaron, you really are a spearheader in that. And you're a very great person. I felt safe to do this with you, which is why I wanted to do it with you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. All right. You know what comes next. Thank you, everyone. Guys, if you're watching right now, hit that like button for us before you exit. Thank you, everyone who watches until the very end, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not,